Hello, this is Miss Korth, and today we are going to be talking about atmospheric pollution with AP Environmental Science. So, the standard that we're going to cover today from our course and exam description is from Unit 7, and the enduring understanding is that human activities have physical, chemical, and biological consequences for the atmosphere. So, our learning objective is to identify the sources and effects of air pollutants. So before we get started today, let's go ahead and log onto this Padlet and answer these two questions. So, which air pollutant can you think of? And which air pollutant is the biggest threat to our ecosystem? And I'll give you a few minutes to do that now. Next, we're going to look at what an AQI is. I'm not sure if you've heard of this term or not, but we're going to log on to that first site, which is called airnow.gov, and read some information about air quality index. And on the second link, go ahead and click that, and you'll find the AQI for our current area. So you'll have to put in your location there, and it's really cool. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that as well. Okay, so now we want to explore a little bit more here. So we want to see any local issues of air pollutants. So can we observe signs of air pollution in our current environment just right outside of Parkview High School? Let's take a little 10-minute walk to find out. So we're going to explore our own environment for signs of air pollution. We're going to take a 10-minute walk outside. You'll get together with a partner and you're going to look for signs of air pollution. You may look for haze or smog, dust buildup on buildings, discoloration of buildings. You might see smoke or exhaust from vehicles or smells that might be related to burning. So go ahead with your partner and we'll take that walk now. Okay, guys. So as after we walked outside, let's go ahead and reflect on that. We're going to be prepared to share our thoughts at the end of this lesson. But the questions we want to be thinking of what signs of air pollution did you notice in our local environment? Where do you think the air pollution is coming from? And how might this affect the plants, animals, or people there? So let's go ahead and dive into the six criteria air pollutants identified by the Clean Air Act. So our essential questions are: what are the six criteria air pollutants? What are the effects of these air pollutants? And how can we reduce the human impact on air quality? So first, I'll give you an easy way to remember the air pollutants. It's called nose clip. So N for nitrogen oxides, O for ozone, S for sulfur dioxide, C for carbon monoxide, L for lead, and P for particulate matter. So that is an easy mnemonic to help you remember the six criteria air pollutants. So pollutants can be emitted in different ways into our atmosphere. They can be emitted naturally through lightning, volcanoes, and things like that. But there's also some human influence as well, such as farming and transportation, and also factories. So all of these things can emit pollutants into our atmosphere. So the first one we'll talk about is nitrogen oxides. These are designated as NO2, NO, or sometimes you'll see it as NOx. These come from motor vehicle and fossil fuel combustion, but it can also be a natural emission by forest fires and lightning. Um, Nitrogen oxides can be an irritant to the respiratory tract, and they're a big contributor to acid rain. Next is the ground level ozone, which is O3. So all of ozone is O3. This is a secondary pollutant formed by sunlight and water when it reacts with VOCs, nitrogen oxides, and oxygen. This is also a respiratory irritant and can damage plants. There is a difference between good ozone and bad ozone. So just want to make sure you know the difference there. So the good ozone, of course, is formed up in the stratosphere, in our atmosphere, where O2 is split by the sunlight. An unstable free oxygen binds to another oxygen and forms O3. And this is a natural process. However, bad ozone is a secondary pollutant, and it's called ground level ozone because it occurs on the ground. This is when nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds react in the presence of sunlight. This is a human influence process, and it's a very bad pollutant. Some issues with the good ozone. Remember, the good ozone is in the stratosphere, but it can get depleted by chlorofluorocarbons. Luckily, because of some laws that we have in place, that those have actually improved, and our ozone has actually gotten better in the stratosphere. Some consequences of the good ozone going away might be an increase in skin cancer caused by the UVB rays, and it can also affect life cycles of plants and marine life as well. Bad ozone. So this is caused by an increase in release of nitrogen oxides through fossil fuel combustion and VOCs in chemical solvents. So this occurs at ground level, and we will definitely go over this reaction later because you guys will need to know that for the AP exam. So we'll talk about that in more detail later. Some consequences of bad ozone is that it can cause respiratory problems as well, such as asthma, bronchitis, emphysema. But it can also damage plants and impact the carbon cycle. Also, it is a greenhouse gas and could be absorb infrared radiation. So another pollutant is sulfur dioxide. This is from the combustion of coal and oil, and it's SO2. This is also a respiratory irritant, and it affects plant tissues. Carbon monoxide, that's just CO. This is very dangerous. It can come from vehicle exhaust, but it's very dangerous because it can bind to the hemoglobin of the red blood cells and really be threatening to humans. So you have to be very careful of carbon monoxide poisoning. It can be especially dangerous indoors where there's poor ventilation. So when the carbon monoxide binds to the hemoglobin of the red blood cells are basically absorbing it, thinking that it's oxygen, but it's not oxygen. So it can cause serious problems leading up to death. So you have to be very, very careful of carbon monoxide. Some potential danger zones of this could be in the house near a fireplace or heating appliances or even a stove or car. Don't ever burn a kerosene stove indoors. That is very dangerous. So just be careful of that. Next, we have lead. Lead was in gasoline up until 1996, but it also can be paint in older buildings. We all know about the Flint, Michigan crisis with the water, and we'll be learning about that as well when we talk about water. But lead can be very toxic to the central nervous system of living things. Next, we have particulate matter. This is from the combustion of fossil fuels and biomass. Um, Road dust, rock crushing, volcanoes, fires, all of that is particulate matter. And it can get into our lungs and cause issues. But it can also block sunlight and prevent photosynthesis for our plants in the ecosystem if it's really heavy. And particulate matter has some sizes that we need to be attuned to. So basically, the PM, particulate matter 2.5, that's the greatest health concern because it can lodge very deep into the respiratory tract and a little bit more toxic. PM10 is also a health concern, but it's too small to go down too far. So anything larger than PM10 will be caught in the nose and throat and filtered out by the mucus. All right, so before we move on, those are the six air pollutants identified by the Clean Air Act before it was amended in 2007. We'll go over those later. But let's revisit this Padlet, students. So we want to go back to the Padlet that we started at the beginning, and let's answer or modify the question. So which air pollutant is the most interesting to you and why? So after all the things we learned today, which one is the most interesting and why? And then also answer, what is one thing that can be done to reduce this air pollutant? Okay, so try to think of something. All right. I'll give you a few minutes to do this, and then we're going to move on to our final summative little project for this. So, in summary, here, we want to summarize our learning by finding one current event article about air pollution. You're then going to create a news report, skit, or infographic to share your article with the class. And you are allowed to work with a partner for this. So, go ahead and you can pick your partners now, and I'll give you the instructions on the next slide. We do want to reference our sources in APA 7 style. And then here are the instructions for the little project. Okay. So we can either have two options here. You could either do a news skit or you could do an infographic. So for the news skit, you want to think live from the scene. You're going to act as reporters, scientists, or eyewitnesses covering a pollution crisis or breakthrough in clean air solutions. So there's some parameters for you to include with your skit. If you want to do an infographic, you can also work with a partner for this, and you're going to turn your key information into a colorful infographic. We want to talk about causes and effects, and any local and global data used in the article, and also any solutions for that. You guys will share this with the class, and I'll give you ample time to work on it, and we'll discuss that later. All right, I hope you learned a lot about air pollutants today. Thank you, and have an awesome day.